Good afternoon and welcome to this week's reading. This week, I was playing around with the question of when encountering others, what stories from our book of life naturally arise for the telling? And what I was thinking of with this was the importance of storytelling, right? Everyone loves a good story. Everyone knows people that tell really riveting stories. They also know people that they avoid because they just keep droning on and repeating the same stories over and over again, almost to the point where it's a memorized script that they're saying, right? We all know people that they know exactly when to pause, they know exactly when to take a breath, and you can follow along, same as if you're watching a movie that you love very, very much, where you could be reading and saying the lines in your head with accuracy because it's just the same story, as opposed to those ones where you're kind of on the edge of your seat, even if the story itself is huge and it's a big fishtail and all that kind of stuff. There's still just something about stories and the way stories are told to people. And I think it's very interesting that, story is a universal concept for us because every culture has their stories, every family has their story, every individual has a story, right? We are made up of stories. And the important thing I find is kind of being able to tune into the stories that we're saying, the themes that they have, what they say about us, right? Are we saying stories from this idea that we're embodied in our stories and that there's a difference between somebody who embodies their story versus someone who inhabits their stories, because those who embody their stories, they're there. When they're telling you the story, they're reliving it in the moment and you're taking the journey along with them and you can feel the story is alive. Whereas someone who inhabits, that's that script storyteller. That's someone who knows exactly what part of the story to have, when to turn the page, all of that kind of memorized, rote storytelling, which even if there is a little bit of, you know, embellishing and some kind of tone and that in the story, sometimes it becomes so commonplace that the story can kind of feel like it's dead in the sense of how it's told. And, one of the things that I thought of was back when they had bards, right? I know there's still bards that are around today, but back before printed word, right? Bards were the storytellers. They were the libraries that wandered around and told the stories, and people would hang on their words because that was how people got their fiction kick kind of thing. And so we've all had people that have stories that when they finish telling a story, like we kind of whine and say, oh, can we have another one? Because that was really great. And it's important, I think, for us to look at where in our lives does our story have that kind of impact? What are the stories that we're saying that other people are like, I want to hear more of that story, or I want to hear that story again? Because there is something that is alive. There's something magical in those stories when they are spoken from the heart. And what I find really interesting is you can have a story spoken from the heart that is staggered, it's awkward, it starts, it stops, it seems to ramble, but people can become really engrossed in those versus those ones that I have polished this story over 20 years of telling, and so I'm just going to tell it to you the same way that I would read the newspaper to you kind of thing. And so what I find is how stories tell us so much about the people around us and about ourselves. And so it got me thinking, right? Like, who are you as a storyteller? And what do the stories that you say share and show about your life and how you're living your life? I can say that if there's one thing that I have learned along my big journey, it's that we all have a story to tell. And the second thing that I have learned is that that story will grow, expand, and change as we move through the different encounters and the many seasons of our lives. And I want to leave you with one thing to remember is that just like a tarot reading, which is what we're going to be doing, we as storytellers discover our stories through the telling, right? The important thing is to allow the story to evolve, almost like the story to tell itself, instead of putting the story into a framework, into a structure. It has to do this, it has to do that, it has to go there, I have to cry here, I have to smile there, I have to, those kinds of things, because stories, in my opinion, the best stories are the ones that just organically are told. So the purpose for today's reading is to open space to explore your relationship with your inner storyteller. And I'm going to be shuffling this question into the cards, which is, what do the stories you share reveal about the type of storyteller you are? So what do the stories that you share reveal about this type of storyteller that you are? Ready for the cards one more time. Feels pretty good. All right. And lay out the cards, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right, so as we're looking at the type of storyteller we are and the inner stories that we have, we're going to start by really just asking, who are you as a storyteller? And right now, when we're looking at it, we have the King of Pentacles. And the King of Pentacles is saying, as a storyteller, or as the storyteller that is the best storyteller for you to be. It is a storyteller of someone who is embodied in their lived experience. The King of Pentacles has done everything that he's done in order to get to the place where he is, right? He's not somebody that's going to sit on the sideline and order everybody to go off and do it. He is a self-made king. He has worked hard. He has tilled the land. He has gone hunting. He has gone and built his house. Everything that he has, everything that he owns has come from the work of his hands and his body. And that's the type of storyteller that we're being asked to sit with, right? We want to be someone that when they tell the story, even if they add embellishments, that you can feel the reality, you can feel the truth, you can feel the lived experience of that person in the stories that they're telling. The other thing with the King of Pentacles that I think is really important when we're looking at the type of storytellers that we want to be or that we want to embody, the King of Pentacles is also someone who's very down to earth, right? Yes, there might be some embellishing in the story. The fish might be, instead of being this big, it might be, the size of a car. But the thing is even if the size of the fish is embellished, from the telling, from the way that the story is coming out, that this is somebody that understands what fishing is all about. If it's the same thing, right? Like if somebody tells you that they built a mansion, right? Maybe the mansion was a little bit smaller, and maybe it was a cabin, but the way that they talk about it, the way that they tell you about the experience, that they have the capacity to build something. And so I think that's one of the things that's really, really important for us to look at as the type of storyteller that has the capacity to bring great meaning into the world. We need to root our stories in the realities that we've lived. And sometimes the realities that we live, they're harsh. Sometimes the realities that we lived are amazing. The thing is all of those stories of the rainbow of human existence needs to be told, but it needs to be told from that grounded, this is what I have experienced in my life. And from there, we then ask, so what helps you embody your stories, right? So if you want to embody the stories the way the King of Pentacles would be, then what helps you to embody that? What helps you to really live in your story? And if you think of your life as your story, where are you? Are you grounded in that story, or are you just living on the periphery, right? I'll go back to, are you embodied in your daily story? Are you just inhabiting a story and going from one routine to another to another? And when you talk to people, are you talking from a story of somebody who is making daily choices, who is really, really engaged and involved with building the life that they want to be living? And so when we ask about what helps to embody the story, I love that the Two of Wands comes up, because the twos are choice cards, right? We're at a crossroads, and it's whatever the element is of that card is the kind of choice that we're facing. And so with the Two of Wands, when we're asking, how can I embody my life story? The best way that you can do it is to choose to follow your passions. Choose to follow your energy. Choose to follow the things that motivate you to really be present, to really be there within your story. Because if you're telling a story, um, I'll put it this way. So if you're telling a story about a princess in a magical kingdom, and that's really the kind of mythical fantasy that you love, you're going to light up when you're telling that story. Versus if you are somebody that really, really is all about, I'm just sorry, I'm trying to think of something that it could be about, say somebody that likes sci-fi, right? Then if you're a sci-fi person, but you're telling a fantasy romance story, it's going to land in a very, very different way. Even kind of also looking at, if you're somebody that is very much a biographical person, if you're very much into history, then those are the kind of stories that are really going to light you up. And people can tell when you're telling your story, they can tell whether you're making it up, winging it, or just kind of saying it for the sake of saying it, versus someone who's like, this is the life that I've lived. Isn't it amazing? Isn't it wonderful? Don't you want to hear about how I wash 4 plates every morning? Right? It comes to the point where when you're embodied your story, it really makes no difference what you're telling. It's how you're telling. It's the way that you're bringing people into your world so that they can understand. Sure, somebody might go, that's really boring, 4 plates, you wash them every day. But if you're like, yeah, but when you look at this plate, it's amazing, it's wonderful. There's always a little bit of a different kind of dirt on it, and sometimes I have to scrub a little bit more. The type of storyteller you are, the content, really, the topic really becomes re not redundant, second to the storytelling itself. And so that's going to help you embody your stories, is by choosing the stories that fill you with life force energy, that give you that, oh, I need to be here, I need to be present, I need to be part of this unfolding. How animated is your storytelling? That's our next card. And here we have justice. And this one's interesting because I think when we look at animated, I love, so when I was teaching, I used to love to read Robert Munsch to my students. And we were lucky enough, my children, I should say, were lucky enough that Robert Munsch actually showed up at their school and did an impromptu reading. He was never on the schedule to show up. It was just he was on tour and had a few minutes available, and they just basically said, where's the nearest school? They went there and they got an impromptu visit from Robert Munsch. If you are unfamiliar with Robert Munsch, he writes a lot of children's stories, and he is so animated, right? And I've watched him perform, and I would embody him kind of when I would read to my students and to my children. But the thing is how animated your storytelling is going to be also very dependent on the audience. And I want to be very clear that you can be very animated, right? You can be very enlivened in your story that you're telling. How you tell it and the way that you channel the energy of the telling of the story is going to be very, very dependent on the people that you are sharing the story with, right? So what this comes down to is discernment, I believe. And the let me see. it's funny, it's a storytelling reading and I'm stumbling over my words, but that's okay. Um, so the thing with justice is able to say there are certain choices that you make, and the outcome of those choices can determine what happens next. So if you are very animated in the way that you're telling a story, to, let's say, the wrong people, then the story is going to fall flat, or the story can actually maybe get you in trouble. And because justice is often connected to the legal system, you could say something like, so if you're telling a story, right, and you really want to embody the story and share the story, and you're telling somebody, yes, I was driving so fast that I didn't have time to see that the person in front of me was braking and I smashed into them, right? That's probably not a story that you're going to want to tell the police. But it's all about the discernment of how do I get my story across? What is important about my story? And the other thing that I like about having justice here is that knowing how animated your storytelling is often based on how the previous story you told was. And what I say to that is a lot of times we are very animated about the stories that we tell, especially if they're stories that we've lived and they're stories that are connected to the things that we're passionate about. The thing is there are people and places for our story. And when you have low self-esteem, if you struggle with lovability, if you struggle with visibility, then when somebody asks you a question, chances are you might blurb your whole story out on them. And then when it's received in less than favorable ways, then you learn my story has no value, my story has no purpose. There's something wrong with me, so I need to stop sharing my story. And what justice is saying is it's less about you and your story and more about who are you sharing your story with? Because our stories need to be treated as sacred. And they need to be treated in a way that allows us to honor the story, but also the people that are open to hearing our story. Because even if it's a silly little story, there's always a lesson, there's always a gem that is shared when we share stories because it's a connection with someone else. And so card is coming out to say it's very important that you make peace with the stories that you have about the stories you've said in the past, because it's time to clear the slate and move forward in a way sorry, that you can animate your stories, that you can bring life to your stories instead of bringing baggage to them. And I think that that's really kind of an important thing to think about, is because every time you tell a story, what is the baggage that you're bringing along with it? And Justice says, if you have not cleaned the slate, if you still have, whether it be karma or whether it be past issues that have yet to be dealt with, right? If you still have to pay the piper, then you need to clear that and detach that from the stories that you're going to say going forward. The next one I like is how spellbound is your audience? So if you are a storyteller that is speaking from lived experience, if you are telling stories from your passions and your adventures, and you're telling your story without baggage, then your audience is going to be spellbound, and the spell weaver is the Queen of Wands, and the Queen of Wands is very charismatic. She is very uh passionate about the things. And what's interesting that I like is with the Queen of Wands is she's very private, in the sense that all the queens deal with their inner circle, right? They deal with their family, they deal with their friends, they deal with their community in a different way than the kings. The kings are very, I'm out there to kind of conquer the world kind of idea. And the queens are like, I'm here to bring harmony to the spaces that I inhabit. And even if they are spaces outside of the home, they're still her spaces, and she wants them to be filled with harmony. The Queen of Wands is one that's going to be, I want to see people that are passionate about their lives. I want to see them being able to fulfill their dreams. And so I want to make sure that when I'm telling a story, that everybody's eyes are on me, that everybody is so caught up in my story that their worries and that their fears and that their issues take back seat so that they can really be here to get from the story what it is that they need to get from this story. And then our final card is, what cadence and tone do you carry? And a lot of this comes going back to what I was saying at the beginning about how do you tell your stories? Do you tell your story like, oh, I had this thing happen to me, boo-hoo. Oh, and then we went and did this, ha-ha. Or do you tell your stories in a way where people can really envision and be present as if that is almost like a time machine back into that event that actually happened? And I will say that the Ace of Pentacles and the King of Pentacles, you have the beginning and the ending of the Suit of Pentacles all in this one reading. And it's very interesting to see that the cadence and the tone that you carry is really just asking you to develop your own, right? Instead of trying to mimic somebody, because there's a lot of people that we watch. And I'll go back to the Robert Munsch story where, when I would read like I was Robert Munsch, not like, Mrs. Haas in her classroom reading to her students. It was always, oh, this is how he did it, and people really liked it. So I have to take in as much of that as I can. And so this is asking you to really embody your voice. And if you have no idea what your voice is, then it is time to start to find it. And the only way that you can find your voice when we're looking at, the message of the Ace of Pentacles is to actually use your voice. Whether you record yourself talking, whether you talk to different people, with whatever you do, the thing is you need to be sharing your stories. And what I will say is sharing your stories does tend to fall into, say, maybe the air category because it is about speaking, or maybe fall into the water category because it is about creation. What the Ace of Pentacles is asking you to do is to embody your story, so that your story, when you share it, when you craft it, you're crafting it from that lived experience. So the request from your inner storyteller from this reading is, come and spend some time with me. Come and listen to my stories. Come and be here in this moment and see every moment, every opportunity of storytelling as a brand new way to tell it. It is not written in stone. It is written in your body. It is written in your experience. And how you feel in this moment, how you act in this moment needs to also become part of the story. And so step out of the role, right? Stop being the mask and step into the person that is living the story that you are trying to tell. So when I look at these cards, I find it interesting that we started with the King of Pentacles and we ended with the Ace of Pentacles, and very much this idea of stand grounded in who you are, stand grounded in your story, and trust your story to almost craft itself from your experiences. And then we also have two wands. So again, with your story and your storytelling, it's about being firmly grounded into who you are and into what you are experiencing and living, but make sure that you're motivated by your passion, by your desires, by your need to explore and to see what's there, right? To very much be present. And then you have Justice, who comes in to balance the scales, right? How much of you is detached from your joy, from your passion, from your desires? How much of you is just plodding along in routines and habits? When I look at this reading, I think it's absolutely crazy that not only is it balanced, but look at, you have the King and the 2 and the Queen and the Ace. Numerically, they are so close together because the queen is just one step numerically below the king, and the two is numerically one step above the ace. And so as you begin to figure out how you're going to embody your story and what is actually making you passionate about, Justice says, we're going to clear the slate. We're going to go back a couple steps and we're going to start over from the heart, from the body, from everything that we have been going through already. So I see this less as oh, you've done something wrong. You need to go back a few steps, as more of we're trying to go too far, too forward, too fast. And we're being asked, find the gems, clear the slate, go back a step and see what's different, right? Not about change and do something different or do something better. See what's different, because every time you tell a story, the story needs to be different in some way, because you're in a different moment. You're a different person. The people you're talking to are different. So if all you're doing is spewing a recording out of your mouth, then there's some baggage there that justice is asking us to deal with. So I hope you enjoyed. As I said, I seem to be struggling today with some language issues, but that's okay. We always have those days. And so with that, I hope that the king and the queen and our wands and pentacles have also helped you in some way. Oh, and I just want to point out one last thing before I finish, because I just noticed this when I fanned the cards out, is you've got the king of pentacles and the queen of wands, right? But then you also have the two of wands and the ace of pentacles. So not only is it that you've got like these are a little bit numerically higher than these ones, but you also have the balancing between the elements of both of these sets of cards. So you're really, being asked right now to almost like get on a teeter-totter with your inner storyteller. And as you're going up and one's going down, having this conversation. What kind of a storyteller are we? What do I need to have, to change how I'm telling my stories? What is my relationship with my stories? Because the stories that we tell, that's what people walk away from us with, right? They don't walk away remembering who we are. They walk away remembering who we created in the stories that we told. So I hope you enjoyed this reading, and I will see you again next week. In the meantime, take care, and I will see you around the webs.